Took a slight break there, 4 or 5 days. Feels like forever since we've been recording the video. Welcome back to the channel, I guess it is. If it's the first time, welcome in, I guess. This is my grind channel where I look at statistics, metrics, profiles, potential dynasty edges. Lately, and to start off, we've just been breaking down rookie prospects at all positions, really trying to jump around, look at prospects we don't hear as much about, but I'm starting to run out of those, apart from tight ends. Today we're going to look at, tonight, whatever it is for you, we're going to look at Devonta Smith, which shouldn't take too long, right? I mean, really, what is there to say? He's an Alabama wide receiver, so he's great. So yeah, these videos are really just a first blush. Like, if I were to summarize a profile, looking at my first look at a profile through their statistics, how they compare to past players, how likely that makes them to break out in the NFL. I'm very much a nerd, or fake nerd at least. So no real tape opinions here. Click, everyone just left. Yeah, excellent. I'm really just going to look at how the stats and the advanced metrics that he produced in college compare to past players at first blush, and what that makes me think his chances are for fantasy football. So let's do that, I guess. Thanks again for checking it out if you are, and if you're not, I guess I'll check it out next time. I don't know. Alright, jump over to the big screen for a second and take a look. Hey, I'm over here now. So Devonta Smith, I actually expected to be high on Devonta Smith. He's right here behind my fat head, so let me shrink myself even further, which makes me happy. I expected to be high on Devonta Smith because everyone liked Judy, and everyone liked, well, some people liked Henry Ruggs last year, and Jaylen Waddle, even last year, was getting some hype as a guy who can't get on the field but has all the skills and the tapes and the metrics and stuff. It doesn't have any of the metrics, by the way. So yeah, I thought Devonta Smith might be somewhat missed in that more, especially when talking about Henry Ruggs last year. I was like, well, you know, do you like Devonta Smith? Because he's actually doing more of what successful players in the NFL actually do in college. And mostly I got a head shaking there. But to be fair, that was before anyone had really broken into him. He wasn't a prospect last year, and so yeah, that's probably an unfair comparison. But I would say also, looking at his profile, it's very, very clear that he was something different last year. Now, the typical breakdown of him is going to include all these great wide receivers. Could anyone point to the one that's had a great season yet, by the way? No. All these wide receivers with draft capital. Okay, yeah, I'll go with that. The NFL loves Alabama, though. It drafts Alabama at a higher rate than any other team, especially at the wide receiver position. So, you know, that might just be a slight bias there, especially since we've had 2 good wide receivers from them in the last ever. In terms of fantasy and in terms of NFL production, we've had 2. It's Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, and both of them did what you would expect good wide receivers to do in their stats and advanced metrics, and all the others that got hyped up and talked, I mean, it just didn't happen. So, first thing to do is adjust down the adjustment that the NFL and most evaluators seem to have when it's Alabama. I mean, I don't know why, but everyone expects Alabama to produce the best players, and it doesn't. It's produced 2 really good ones, and they did what good wide receivers on other teams also do, so actually they were fairly easy to point out. Now, I will say, having thrown a little shade there at Judy, I think he's a good player. He profiled fairly well, not like Calvin Ridley, not like Julio Jones, but a good wide receiver, sustained production, and I think he might be a buy in Dynasty this offseason since he didn't finish inside the top 24. Some recent research I've been doing for Dynasty League Football, which is where my content goes. Outside of my Patreon account and my Twitter feed, I write for DynastyLeagueFootball.com, and I've been writing up an article for them on breakouts, and it's interesting to note for Judy that most wide receivers that break out into the top 12 in their second year didn't finish inside the top 24 in their first year. So there is actually insurmountable upside for Judy, as well as there is for T. Higgins, as well as there is for CeeDee Lamb. There's no reason to discount him compared to the others, because no matter how I measure it, Judy had a good rookie year. So let's say Devonta Smith was at least playing on a good team with on a team with Jerry Judy, another good wide receiver. The only problem is here, and this is why I really don't get why most wide receiver valuations from Alabama, and specifically Devonta Smith and Jaylen Waddle, start out here, because, well, I just dismissed the first few, and here's me dismissing the next few. Players who are good in the NFL, good for fantasy in the NFL, who played on the same team, happens relatively rarely. You know what happens when they do? They both do pretty much the same thing most good wide receivers do in college when they're going to be good in the NFL. There's no real significant pattern difference between players that play on the same team together and then are good in the NFL, and players who don't play on the same team and then are good in the NFL. They kind of do very similar things, which is why wide receivers are a little more easy to prospect through data and analytics than, say, quarterbacks or the running back position. Well, that's not so bad, but the tight end position specifically is relatively hard, for reasons I've spoken about elsewhere. So, yeah, just don't care about it, I guess. Jamar Chase is in this year's class, and he plays with Justin Jefferson, and guess what? They both did what you would expect good wide receivers to do in college if they're going to be good in the NFL. There is no example that I can find of teammate score or adjusting players' production up to make them look like most wide receivers that do good in the NFL has worked out. The example I've had thrown at me is Paris Campbell, and let me know when Paris Campbell's good in the NFL for fantasy, having a top 24 season, and maybe you'll take a look at it. Now, actually, I happen to know Paris Campbell's profile is okay. It's actually decent. It doesn't compare too badly to past wide receivers. I just think it was a little mediocre, but in some ways, so every profile. Not everyone looks like Calvin Johnson. I thought he was a decent prospect. There were just other players I liked in that class more because they distanced themselves in college compared to what past players have done and before going good in the NFL have actually done. But here I'm profiling 4 or 5 different wide receivers, but it's kind of necessary, for me at least, when most of the opinions you might come to this video with all revolve around things that never happen. I get a lot wrong. I've got a lot of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside on my teams. Denzel Mims certainly didn't fire in year one, had a bad rookie season. I'm not saying I get it right, but the players I drafted did the things in college that good players did, that they have in common. And the players I miss on, sometimes you miss. I have a fairly decent miss rate and a fairly decent hit rate. What I've never done is drafted a player based on a stat that I made up by adjusting something, and the adjustment was done because no reason, just because I want that player to look better. Why are we going out of our way to adjust players' productions to make them look better or like wide receivers they hit in the NFL for events that have never actually happened? Why don't you just say you like the player? That's fine to me. You don't have to make up historical examples or pretend there are historical examples where teammates held back a player's production. Chase Claypool just hit. He had a below average profile. It happens. You can just like a player and then try and understand his metrics without making up a reason that he was held back. Sometimes we find them. Chase Claypool, for example, in the review of his profile I just did, we mentioned that he was originally from the Canadian system. Canadian Football League, or whatever it's called over there, and so there might have been a slowness to his development. Now, is that a narrative? Yes, because we don't have enough players with below-average profiles hitting in the NFL, because it doesn't typically happen, but at least that's a player that hit, and so you go look for a reason, and maybe you keep that in mind when you see other below-average profiles. Now, Devonta Smith is not from Canada. He also didn't play in Ohio, or as a quarterback or as a running back, and that's all the narrative examples I've found in the very few exceptions to being productive in college makes you more likely to be good in the NFL. Those are all the examples, and you'll notice none of them are, and they played with Calvin Johnson. The few examples we have, DK Metcalf and Aj Brown, guess what? They both broke out and had pretty interesting market share. Now, they were limited in terms of injury, and DK Metcalf took some seeing. To be fair, DK Metcalf may be a good example, but he wasn't actually playing in the year he was healthy with AJ Brown, and no one else on the team has proved to be good or been drafted significantly, so the teammate score reason breaks down there too. Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry played on the same team. They have great production. There was no question that they were productive in college. We didn't need to adjust them up for each other being on the team. And is that all the examples? Sammy Watkins played on a team with a few players, but none of them really made it in the NFL to an extraordinary degree. Martavis Bryant, because off-field reasons, to be fair, so we can't really know for sure. Sammy Watkins has been a good NFL player, I think that's fair to say, but not really the wide receiver one that we thought he could be. And he again, actually had good, decent, at least, production compared to past prospects from that more congested team, so he doesn't justify adjusting Devonta Smith's production up, or Jaylen Waddle's for that matter. Now, that long rant is over, and I've had that rant several times in several different formats. You may tell, since I don't even have notes and I can just say it all verbatim at this point. Let's actually talk about Devonta Smith, because here's the thing. Starting there is trash, and all those reasons for liking him are also trash, but here's a weird thing about Devonta Smith. You don't actually need any of them to see a productive player in college. Now, his profile doesn't look as good as some, and I have him ranked in my second tier at wide receiver, ranked between 5 and 7. I actually like him as well as I like Taylor Wallace and I like Elijah Moore, and Devonta Smith is more likely to get draft capital compared to both of them, and so that's probably going to push him over there, and that leaves basically 3 players I really like or think are more likely to break out in the NFL in this class, and that's a fairly high ranking, and I didn't do any of those shitty, terrible reasons for adjusting. Like, you don't need to. So, what does his production actually look like? Alright, that's why I'm on the big screen, and I forgot all about it. There you go. The first thing to know is, like Elijah Moore, he comes from the SEC West, which is the most highly drafted conference. Alabama's the most highly drafted team, I believe, from that conference as well. So, again, lots of expectation of draft capital coming Smith's way, especially as he played as a wide receiver 1 this very last year, and we know some analysts, and definitely the NFL, really put a high emphasis on what players have done most recently. And there's some reason for that. There is some signal that last year has some significance. I tend to find the average works better for us, and so we find some edge there. But in the last year, they were as physically developed as they're ever going to be. They've learnt the team scheme and the routes and all their skills and tricks and the things they do on the field as well as they're ever going to. And so in some ways, it's an interesting year to look at because this is where they've come to. And in that last year, like, without irony, Devonta Smith, and it was 2020 to be fair, so it was a weird-ass year, but he was phenomenal in a few different ways. Now, personally, and given the history of wide receivers that break out in the NFL, I find it more important to be great early, or good early, great compared to most players early, than great compared to all players in your last year, but that still doesn't mean he didn't have a great season in 2020, and actually in 2019 as well. He had a very good season in 2019, and both of those years put him well within my radar and rank him around 5th or 6th in this class, in the second tier of wide receivers, and the most likely to get draft capital from them. And I didn't have to pretend things that have never happened are going to happen in order to get there. So, I just reiterated the same point, but it's apparently really important to me. So he broke out at age 20 and broke out at a 30% threshold in terms of dominator rating at age 21. Now the 21 is a little old, but he did break out at a 30% threshold, which Rotoviz has taught us over recent years is fairly important if you want to reduce your bucket of fish you're actually fishing for wide receivers in, and it's actually a richer bucket, more hits with smaller numbers actually hitting that 30% threshold, and so that's decent for him, although I would say it's a little on the old side in terms of breakout age. But breakout age is really just an indication of the type of profile you're looking at. You're looking at a player who really kicked it up a notch towards the second half of his season, which again fits with some of those narratives, but there were no reason to get there on it. The breakout age kind of does it, and the fact he did it 2 years in a row, age 20 and 21, already tells you something that it wasn't a fluke year, it wasn't a minor year, and these breakout ages only use seasons where players play more than 6 games, so it wasn't a small sample trap either. Moving on, and actually into the metrics we found in one of the other videos I did to be the most significant for predicting wide receiver success based on the formulas and results tab, which again is in the database, which is attached or written down in the comments, or I forget how YouTube works. I've been away a while, okay? But it's down there somewhere. So yards per team yards per team attempt above conference, and Devonta Smith scores about 0.3, which means he was getting more yards per team attempt than you would expect someone from that conference as a wide receiver for the average of his career, because that's the average number, not just in that one good year. So even taking into account those 2 years where he's below, I'm telling you, I'm going to show that he's below expectation, some of his career is positive overall compared to his conference. In terms of age adjustments, which I actually was doing earlier, and I do mostly because I find age adjustments to be the most useful at wide receiver, you can see at the column on the far, whatever the furthest column away from his name is, I don't know if that's the left or the right to you. I'm not very smart, I get it. But Devonta Smith, again, is above average for the entirety of his career, not just in that best year, so he has a fairly positive profile. If we go and look at the production by year, which I have started to like to do, and I've highlighted the years in grey or white alternately so that they're a little easy to identify while watching a video, but the database isn't listed like that, you should know. It's interesting to me that Devonta Smith stepped onto the team at age 18. He only played 8 games, and while he does play as like the wide receiver 4 or 5 down here in terms of the market share of yards he's getting, notice he's also fairly significantly scoring about the same number of points per game as Henry Ruggs, who's playing as a wide receiver 3, and he quickly overtakes Henry Ruggs in terms of the volume he actually creates for himself in this so-called congested situation with all these wide receivers on the team. Also important to note, in this first year, Calvin Ridley's on the team, who did literally step onto the team and just take over the freaking position. I'll do videos of past prospects again, but you can see his data in the database, and he never really... there was some regression there, or digression perhaps, compared to his first year, but he was pretty much always above the age curve and looked like a fairly good profile for a player who started playing later into his career. Now, Devonta Smith stepping onto a team at age 18, so under physically developed, with Calvin Ridley playing in his last year, kind of before he didn't slip there, and Jared Judy, who was drafted in the NFL, and I've already told you, has a decent profile. I could break both of those down too, but I'm desperately trying to get these review videos down under an hour, Well, 30 minutes, but still, they feel like they take an hour. So moving on, both of those two have good profiles in that they were creating and earning a lot of opportunity. So there is somewhat of a vacuum suck there. Henry Ruggs, people wanted to adjust up throughout his career because that was always a problem. But the thing is, Calvin Ridley leaves and Henry Ruggs is not the one who takes over the opportunity. In fact, it's Jared Judy and Jaylen Waddle in the next year. So if we skip ahead to 2018 after Calvin Ridley leaves the team, you can hopefully see here something like Jared Judy takes over that role, or creates a new role for himself, dominating opportunity and scoring 18.9 fantasy points per game, which is actually significant for a wide receiver 1 in that conference. And that's a high-flying, high-scoring conference as well. Again, it's one of the points at age 19, Jared Judy did exceptionally well, and that's why I like age adjustments. And it showed Jared Judy to have had a pretty good college profile compared to past prospects that have gone on to do well. Now, Jaylen Waddle, this is, for me, one of the most positive things on Jaylen Waddle's profile, but I've done a separate video on him. But it's a fact that when Calvin Ridley does leave and Jaylen Waddle is in his second year, age 19, he has the second most receiving yards percentage on the team. 11.5 points per game is not so bad for a wide receiver 2, but this is a high-scoring offense. It's not as impressive as Judy. He didn't co-opt or create the opportunity for himself in terms of targets and receiving yards as Judy did. But it's actually pretty positive for a second-year player playing 15 games in the SEC West. It wasn't terrible. What I would have expected Jaylen Waddle to do is do more of that Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry type comparison where Jerry Judy maintains that role. In fact, I think he declines slightly, but work up his own opportunity to show that he can compete and create that many targets and receiving yards for himself. Instead, despite playing 13 games, he didn't do that. And again, there's context to be known there. Like, we need to know more about, was he injured? Were those 13 games played in 2019 really 13 full games? I think there's some potential that Jaylen Waddle's profile isn't quick, but again, I've already done a Jaylen Waddle profile. Getting onto Henry Ruggs and Devonta Smith plays a 4th wide receiver in terms of overall opportunity at age 19. Again, those first 2 years don't look great when you compare him to past prospects, and it's the most important time. But Jerry Judy is dominating, and apparently Jaylen Waddle might have more to his profile, or might have created more for his profile than we might have seen. There's no reason to boost Devonta Smith up here. He just wasn't able to outcompete any of these three wide receivers in terms of creating his own role. I think the most interesting comparison is Henry Ruggs, who, yes, is a first-round pick and a deep threat guy, but again, Devonta Smith does decent enough to earn similar opportunity. He gets, 9% of the receiving yards playing 13 games. Henry Ruggs get 10% of the receptions playing 14 games. And they both have about the same market share of receiving yards playing as a wide receiver 4. So it is getting divided here between multiple guys more than you expect. The problem with that is, given the history that we've seen with past prospects, what you would expect good wide receivers to do is soak it up so hard that there are 2 or 3 guys with incredible or decent amounts of market share on the team. Could you do it with 3 guys? I don't know. We've never actually seen 3 successful fantasy wide receivers play on the same team in college, as far as I know. The best example is that Sammy Watkins team, and again, none of them really panned out, probably for ancillary reasons, and we have relatively little examples outside of that. But we do know 2 players can definitely do it. So you would expect if 2 of these players were NFL caliber wide receivers for fantasy purposes, that they would have shown more. Jerry Judy is really the only one who hit those marks, but again, I'm kind of doing a profile of all 4 here, and I'm just meant to be talking about Smith. At age 19, missing the mark is a bad sign. I like them to do it early, but there is some justification here in that the team seems to be spreading it out, but that is overall a negative point because good wide receivers can force the issue. And so that's the problem on Devonta Smith's profile. However, moving on, and with moving on to 2019, Devonta Smith jumps to the wide receiver 1 position with Jerry Judy on the team. I didn't need to make something up or look for a historical example that has never actually happened to notice that Judy, who's had a good year already under the age curve or under the breakout age curve that I like to see, but Smith then takes over the role. So he's taken longer to develop, but he has produced over the average players for playing at age 20. Good prospects get a certain amount of market share, which I'll show you in a minute, on average, and Smith blows past that average and overtakes another wide receiver who's also shown that same trend at age 19. That to me means we can kind of discount year 1 and 2, not because of a fictional example that's never happened, but because we know Judy had a decent profile and he's had a decent rookie season, and frankly Smith crests the age curve. Instead of just focusing on their actual breakout age, we can involve some little context here and notice that Smith actually did well at the ages he played at age 20 and 21 compared to past prospects, okay? It's not those 2 important years, which mean I'm a little lower than him, and I think the ultimate rankings of this class is going to have players above him, like I told you at the start I already do, because I think they're more likely to break out, because that's the most significant error I found for chances of breaking out. But that doesn't mean Smith has a bad profile or is unlikely to break out in the NFL. His age 20 season kind of indicates it's that punch through the glass ceiling of succeeding in the NFL that really makes you take notice, especially with Judy still on the team, so you don't even have to go, got to adjust it up. He does it with Judy on the team, which is what good wide receivers tend to do. Wish he'd done it earlier, but if wishes were horses, I'd be riding to work. I think I got it right this time. Nice. At age 20, with Judy gone off to the NFL and Ruggs, like it mattered, also gone off to the NFL. And Ruggs was an incredible producer for Alabama, by the way. That's no shade to what he did in college. He just didn't do what most successful fantasy wide receivers do in college before going to the NFL. But with Smith on the team by himself with only Waddle left standing, and he only plays 6 games in 2020, Smith just takes over the role and utterly dominates. Like, compared to any player playing it at 21, Smith had a fantastic season. Whether comparing to players that have had top 12 seasons in the NFL or multiple top 12 seasons, there are relatively few players that actually play at the age of 21 before going on to the NFL and then be successful. But of those players, Smith just smashes, and it's on a linear progression that we can imagine. If everyone played at age 21, Smith would be at the top of the list for what most players have done at age 21 compared to past prospects. So 20 and 21's where it's at for Smith. Does it mean he has a slightly lower chance of hitting out? I honestly think so. But when you look at those 2 years, he is definitely above average, significantly so, and that he shares in common with players who have had good fantasy production in the NFL. He shares something in common with them. We didn't have to make anything up. We don't have to go betting on something that's never happened. He did stuff that has happened before and has led to successful seasons. So I don't know why people talk about it, because it's never happened, and it's a silly thing to bet on, and you don't have to. Alright, so let's not end the start of trying to break down Devonta Smith by looking at that market share of receiving yards compared to average. And you can see those two last green dots there. That's his age 20 and 21 season. So this is his ages mapped against a market share of receiving yards. The red trend line there is actually the average of successful wide receivers, or wide receivers that have had at least 150 points in a single season since 2003 to 2008. So essentially that's the average I'm talking about of successful wide receivers in the NFL. And as you can see, he crests that line at age 20 and maintains it through to 21. And outside of the Demaryius Thomases and the G.J. Moores, those faded little legs, is all the way at the top of those ages, and relatively few players could be said to have done better playing at those ages and then gone on to be successful in the NFL. So he's got half a great profile. Now, we can make excuses for someone like Calvin Ridley because he literally didn't play. But would I be surprised if he played at age 19 and 18 and 19 if his production looked like this, and then he went on to dominate from 2021 and into the NFL? No, I wouldn't. I can't really say what he would have done then. So if we can write off those early years because I don't know, no real reason, and look at the second half of his profile, he definitely looks good. But I don't write them off. People want to make up a fictional example, as I continue to rant about in this video. Instead, what I say is his ceiling might be capped. His ability to outcompete other players in the NFL for opportunity might not be as good as some players in this class. But given the right circumstances, Devonta Smith can get it done. Yeah, I like the way I said that. That wasn't an accident of phrasing at all. Yeah, he definitely can. I've also started to experiment, because I know how you all like grass, or at least I like grass, by mapping the yards per team pass attempt, another stat that has pretty good correlation compared to, any stats we have. None of them have great correlation, but these have pretty good correlation compared to the other ones that have terrible correlation to success in the NFL. This is yards per team pass attempt using a similar average, but of every player who's have a top 24 season, and it's ordered by age, so 18, 19, 20, 21, and up on the left here, this is the yards per team pass attempt, and this is the year that he played at age 21 that I'm talking about. In 2020, so it's a weird season. Like, that is an amazing yards per team pass attempt year. Again, he played 13 games, and like a lot of players played in 2020, they were playing shortened seasons for one miserable related reason or another, because 2020 was a horrible year, as we all know. But and so maybe you want to adjust it a little bit, but also notice his age 20 season, which is just 2019, which is just a normal normal college football season, he also is significantly above the average in yards per team pass attempt. Again, he's not at age 18 and 19, and this is where we can rope in these examples of plenty of players have gone on to do good in the NFL and not been great, have been below the average age 18 and 19. However, so this is all positive. I like Devonta Smith, and this last year looks phenomenal. I wish it wasn't 2020 so we didn't have to put little asterisks around it, but by himself with Judy gone, again, that doesn't matter so much. You would expect him to be able to do it with another good player on the team, or he will struggle to get in the NFL, but that was an impressive year. I see why people like Devonta Smith and want to find reasons to justify perceived low production. Here's the thing, I don't think he has it. So, what do we do with this age 18 and 19 season? Again, I simply find that players who don't do it early are a little less likely to break out, and I find their ceilings a little more capped than some other players. He didn't play a low percentage of games. He wasn't playing with Calvin Johnson as if it would matter. He's playing with other good players, but he's going to be doing that in the NFL as well. And it wasn't a successful team scoring lots of points, so, there's plenty of opportunity to get targets and get yards compared to some other teams. So you'd have to adjust that adjustment anyway, but ignoring it. So, what do I do with it? Well, I told you at the start, he's between wide receiver 5 and 7 for me. It's in that second tier. There's 3 players I clearly like better than him because they did better at that range of their career, but very few wide receivers have above average conference and age-adjusted production in a highly drafted conference to this level of efficiency and unique efficiency and role blend. I like Devonta Smith. I just don't like him than a couple of other wide receivers who had that more common trait for players that break out in the NFL. Now, typically I talk about likelihood. I don't like players with bad age-adjusted production because they're not likely to break out in the NFL. With Devonta Smith, I'm going a slightly different way. I think he has a decent likelihood to play well in the NFL, but because of his underproduction age 18 and 19, yes, even on Alabama, I think his ceiling might be slightly capped compared to the likes of Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones and some of the other prospects in this class. Now, does that mean he couldn't be the best wide receiver in this class? No. But from what we know of them and looking at the statistical profiles from college, that's where he fits in compared to past prospects who've been good in the NFL. He has a very decent chance of breaking out. He's probably going to get draft capital, which is going to bolster that chance. I think he can take that as well. Some players, for reasons we'll talk about in other videos, I think extra draft capital can actually hurt their chances because they might need more development. I think Devonta Smith, I wouldn't see that on a profile of Devonta Smith, which is actually an advantage of a player playing 4 years. And we've come to be scared of late declares or whatever, or players who play 4 years in college. But that actually gave Smith a chance to do this, which is an incredibly impressive season. So maybe he picked up a step. Maybe he just took a little while to develop. But overall, when you look at the average of this profile, he had a very good profile. When you break it down, compared to other players with a good profile, he has this one negative where he just couldn't quite outcompete players at age 18 and 19, but most can't. So I have him under those players, but I still like him a lot. And that's my first look. That's my first initial kind of review of what Devonta Smith is. Yeah. I felt like I was building to something there, and then I realized, like, that's it. I came to the end of my sentence. I could actually end the video there, so I'm gonna. Who's in that tier with him? Devonta Smith I have ranked pretty much next to Elijah Moore. I've got Elijah Moore over him just because I really like Elijah Moore, and I don't think many people do, whereas I think a lot of people like Devonta Smith, so I'm imagining that Moore's going to be easier to acquire. Sue me for projecting rookie drafts, but that's where I think. If I were to actually rank this tier of players, Jaylen Waddle is probably actually my favorite, or my joint favorite is Elijah Moore. I think Devonta Smith is right there with him, but where people are going to know about or like Smith a little bit more, it's going to be hard to acquire him. Having said that, in rookie drafts, I think are all about going and getting your player. So if you, whatever process you go through, if you like Devonta Smith, I would advise trading up to get him over those players. I'm not adverse to doing that. Where I play Dynasty in multiple leagues, I tend to think more in shares than just one guy I want to go and get. But I will say, while I want Jaylen Waddle and Elijah Moore, I don't want to leave rookie drafts without any Devonta Smith by the time the NFL 2021 season goes. As long as the draft goes roughly how we expect, with him getting decent draft capital. I guess I'll just say, getting drafted to the Jets dependent, because that's a killer. Alright, so yeah, I guess that's it. Let's go big screen. Hey, I'm over here now. Anyway, let me know what you thought. If I really should work to get him smaller and do less ranting, I don't know. Or what you think about Devonta Smith, or examples I may not have come across of players that didn't produce as well because of teammates. Because I ran through all the ones I pretty much have found or have been told to me. And yeah, I would like more context for that, or more reason to think that we could rank better. Because I do think teammates or adjusting for team, or in some way could help us use production to rank players better in a draft class. But it definitely has no business sorting players in terms of likelihood of success, which is typically how metrics can be used for wide receiver, projecting them into the NFL. It's creating these buckets of potential hit rates, much more so than creating rankings of this guy's going to have the best season, this one's going to have a good season. Production metrics struggle to rank classes. And in fact, age adjustments do the best at it, which brings up Devonta Smith's problem again. So I should probably get out of here before I say, more bad stuff about Devonta Smith. This is positive, I swear. This is a I like Devonta Smith video. I think he's decent. I think he's got a chance. I think he was pretty impressive college wide receiver. I just like 2 or 3 wide receivers. You can't see that anymore. Chase Bateman and Rondell Moore a little bit more. Elijah and Rondell Moore are going to ruin my life, because the number of times I've actually said more 2 or 3 times in a row, like it's Anyway, I'm getting out of here. One day I'll have a haircut so I can take the hat off, but for right now, no. Hope you liked the video. Let me know if you did or didn't, and yeah, let's get back to the YouTube grind. Get some more video content out here. Sorry for the slight delay in service there. Appreciate you all, and I will see you again next video. Bye.